All right, you guys. Really sorry about the wait on this one. This definitely took a lot longer than I expected, but it's all good because we're gonna be getting really into this stuff. I'm really excited about this video. So yeah, today we're gonna be talking about American Gods, both the TV show and deities themselves. So this is going to be really fun. This is also going to be an introduction to truth drops. I'm sure a lot of you probably know what a truth drop is, but if you don't, this will help you out. This will let you know what these are. Got the little Among Us thing in there because there really are gods that walk among us, and you'll see what I mean when we get into it. But yeah, so yeah, like I said, these are truth drops. If you don't know what these are, I'm going to use these two stories as an example. So we have David and Goliath on the left, and Cain and Abel on the right. So David and Goliath, you can look at this as like the stereotypical story of like the underdog defeating the big bad bully or whatever. A lot of these you can actually find if you go onto like tvtropes.com and like just look at what tropes are. They can explain a lot of this as well. And then Cain and Abel, obviously you have the one venerated son, and then the brother who is becomes jealous and envious of him and his status. So he ends up killing him in vengeance or out of envy. Yeah, one of those things. So Neil Gaiman, who wrote the book American Gods, also wrote this quote as well. Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us dragons exist, but because they tell us dragons can be beaten. So like I said, this can be an allegory for the typical underdog hero. This could also be an allegory for the spirits conquering the ego. And there's some issues with using that word conquering. A lot of this has to do like the English language and how it sets up these dynamics. But yeah, you can look at this as the spirit conquering the ego. In this sense, you can also look at the story of Cain and Abel as the ego conquering the spirit. So yeah, this does go both ways, and this is really an exercise to like open your mind and really try to see all of these different connections and truth drops in there. And there's like different levels of truth drops too. But what this reminds me of is like going back to watching that '70s show. Anytime Eric tries to talk about Star Wars, and his dad Red is always like, "Oh, that's just childish crap. You need to grow up." And Eric's sitting there trying to explain to him like, "No, this is about like my experience as a growing teenager transitioning into adulthood." Star Wars has a lot of like allegories that really help people at that age. But yeah, so if you want to, if you're interested in looking more into this stuff, there is this one book that really helped me open my mind to this type of stuff. It's called The Mythic Journey: The Meaning of Myth as a Guide for Life. And it takes a whole bunch of like ancient Greek myths, like Oedipus, and well, like that's the typical one everybody thinks of because I think it was like Nietzsche. No, Freud. Freud, who said, like the Oedipal complex, the killing the father and marrying the mother type stuff. But it goes a lot more in depth into that too in this book. So if you're interested, you can probably find that on Amazon or somewhere. So yeah, like I said, truth drops vary in different degrees. So they could be like these allegories. They could be coincidental, or they could have been like intentional. But either way, it's still it whether it was coincidental or intentional, it still doesn't have an effect on like the validity of the truth drop. So like whether they intended this to the dynamic between the spirit and the ego, even if they didn't intend that, it's still a very good allegory for it. But then there are some truth drops that are kind of like a lot more in depth, like to the point where you almost want to say like this person definitely got his ideas off of from some other source. So this is an example. I think I explained this one in the other video. So you have this idea in Jainism of karma being a form of matter. They actually call it dust in here. Yeah, interstellar dust. That accompanies the agent's course and subtle levels. Where is it? It only becomes a precise type of karma when it interacts with a spiritual nomad. When the soul acts, the surrounding karmic particles automatically infiltrate. This is what is called inflow. And then in Philip Pullman's his Dark Materials trilogy, like the Golden Compass movie, and then the TV show that's on HBO right now, he actually has this similar dynamic called dust or Rusakov particles, which is the name of the scientist who discovered them in his book. He calls them elementary particles associated with consciousness that are integral to the plot. Dust is attracted to consciousness, especially after puberty. The church within the series associates it with original sin and seeks its end, which is very similar to Jain thought, where this dust, it's not really seen as sin, but it's just seen as like it attaches you to the wheel of karma and keeps you on that wheel. So yeah, this is very interesting dynamic between these two. So obviously this would be a lot more in depth truth drop than some other ones. So yeah, like I said, it's just an example just to show like varying degrees of truth drops. But now I want to introduce you to American Gods, the TV show that's on right now. And I have to say, this is like one of the best like intros I've ever seen. Unfortunately, as I'm going through all these clips, I'm gonna have to like skip through them just because of the YouTube algorithm or the YouTube copyright system. But I will be linking all of the links to all of the videos in the description. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, so American Gods is I'll set it up for you. It's kind of this idea of like old gods, like old worshipped gods, like the monotheistic religions, or even some of the older like Greek and Roman religions and stuff like that, paganism. So it's those gods battling against the new gods of like economics, media is an example, and like other these like new ideas of like capitalism is another good one. And it's just basically well, you'll see in the intro. So it starts out, like I said, when I've skipped through this, like Buddha mixing in with pharmacology or medicine, this kind of like false happiness as opposed to like the spiritual happiness you would get from following actual Buddhism. You have like just the American like Wild West, like a trope. This is another good one. Technology and like I didn't get it. Technology and like ancient like pyramid religions. You have probably like like the economy. This is more technology. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Like the American space age on the taking over the cross of Jesus, like on the crucifixion. Yeah, so when you it actually all comes out into like this really cool totem pole. Yeah, that's a really good intro. You really should watch the whole thing. But yeah, so in the series, there's this one, the main character Shadow. He actually interacts with these gods, both old and new, in an incarnated form, and it's just really interesting watching the dynamic between all these. I do want to go ahead and get this video up first because as we talk more about these like beings outside, there is really something you should keep in mind. This is from the movie Kingdom of Heaven, and it's I forget the name of the king, but it's the king talking to the knight Balian. I'm gonna have to probably just skip through it like this. Yeah, he asks if he's ever played chess before. He says the whole world is in chess. Any move can be the death of you. Do anything except remain where you started, and you can't be sure of your end. And then he asks him, this is, yeah. He says, no one... Here, let me just play it from here.
Our end, really.
None of us know our end,
Or
really.
what hand will guide us there. A king may move a man.
Father may claim a sin. That man can also move himself. And only then does that man truly begin his
And
own.
only then does that man truly begin his own game. Remember that howsoever you are played, or by whom, your soul is in your keeping alone. Even though those who presume to play you be kings or men of power.
Or gods.
When you stand before God, you cannot say,
The actual God.
but I was told by others to do thus, or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice.
Yeah. So, yeah, anytime you interact with these beings, like, you still have some... I think I said this before in one of my other videos, like, you have... not precedence, but you preside over your own soul, and you preside over your own actions, and no matter what, whether, like he said, whether they be kings or emperors or gods, if following them just because of their title doesn't excuse you from the karma or sin of your actions. So yeah, that's really good to know. So now we'll go into we'll go back to American Gods. This is where Shadow meets the god of media, who is portrayed as, or she portrays herself as I Love Lucy to begin with.
I'm all sword, Shadow. The screen's the altar. I'm the one they sacrifice to.
There it is.
Then till now. Golden age to golden age. They sit side by side, ignore each other, and give it up to me.
So yeah, she's talking about how people venerate her or worship her. And this is really important to pay attention to, because like it's funny that like and I do rag on atheists a lot, but they like to say like, oh, they don't believe in anything or they don't worship anything. Well, if you really understand how worship like actually works and the way she's talking about it here, like you'll realize you do actually worship a lot of things that you aren't aware of. Worship is ritual, stuff like that. It's more about like just like repetition and like where your mind is at the time.
Now they hold a smaller screen in their lap or in the palm of their hand so they don't get bored watching the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Time and attention. Better than lamb's blood.
Yep, that was it. So like, yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I want to talk about American Gods. So whether you're dealing with like old gods, new gods, like this idea of like capitalism or patriotism or something like that, you have to realize you're interacting with like you are interacting with a deity, basically. And I pulled this actually from and this is just to show you that truth drops really come from anywhere. And a lot of people concern themselves with whether or not they're like intentionally placed there, or like who said it or why or this or that. I'm really not so much concerned with the who and the why, but I am concerned with like the what, like what they're saying. Because, like I said in my last video on astrology, like you have that iron rod that resonates with truth inside you. So like you really do have discernment if you're like able to go inside and have that like subtle perception of your own being. But yeah, anyways, so like that idea that she was talking about time and attention being that worship. And that's just people sitting in front of the TV all day long. Like imagine how many people like sit there and binge watch Netflix for hours. I know people will sit there 8 hours a day. I've done it before, 8 hours a day. Sitting there and going through TV shows. But yeah, this one also talks about, he calls it loyalty, but it's just another form of worship. He says, tell me who you're loyal to. Money, fame, is it drink? Is it coming down with the loud pipes in the rain, big chilling for the power for your name? Is it love for the streets when the lights get dark is unconditional? And then Rihanna talks about it too. Tell me who you're loyal to. Start with your woman or your man. End with your family and friends. Loyal to yourself in advance. Which is a really important one, actually, to be loyal to. Tell me who you're loyal to. Is anybody you'd lie for? Anybody you would slide for? Anybody you would die? Slide is like just like attack or whatever. Anybody you would die for. That's what God for. So yeah, in this song, when he refers to loyalty, he's actually talking about it just like on a love, like being in a relationship level. But again, if you open your mind and actually look at all of these truth drops, like you'll be able to realize like there's deeper levels to this, to basically everything you look to. And honestly, in my own opinion, like I said, like whether you think it's like intentional or not, I personally think it actually has something to do with the aspect of like our universe itself. Like there's like try to write an original story without any sort of like tropes or that can't be used as an allegory for something else. I'm pretty sure it's almost impossible. But yeah, like I said, like try not to concern yourself with who's doing this or why, because it really doesn't matter in the long run. Oh yeah, so before we get into this, I did want to get into Carl Jung as well, and we're actually going to sit and listen to this one. It's only like a 2-minute clip, but it's really good for it goes more into depth about like how these deities almost like possess people. And it does mention like World War II and the characters involved in there, so I might have to like blur it out or something, but we'll see what YouTube says about it when I upload it. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. And like I said, I'll link all of these videos in the description.
Perhaps we may sum up this general phenomenon as Ergriffenheit, a state of being seized or possessed. The term postulates not only an Ergriffener, one who is seized, but also an Ergriffir, one who seizes. Wotan is an Ergriffir of men, and unless one wishes to deify Hitler, which has indeed actually happened, he is really the only explanation. It is true that Wotan shares this quality with his cousin Dionysus, but Dionysus...
Wotan is Odin, the berserker, the wanderer, stuff like that. Yeah, just so you know.
Seems to have exercised his influence mainly on women. The Maenads were a species of female stormtroopers, and according to mythical reports were dangerous enough. Wotan confined himself to berserkers who found their vocation as the black shirts of mythical kings. A mind that is still childish thinks of the gods as metaphysical entities existing in their own right, or else regards them as playful or superstitious inventions. From either point of view, the parallel between Wotan, redivivus, and the social, political, and psychic storm that is shaking Germany might have at least the value of a parable. But since the gods are without doubt personifications of psychic forces, to assert their metaphysical existence is as much of an intellectual presumption as the opinion that they could never be invented. Not that psychic forces have anything to do with the conscious mind, fond as we are of playing with the idea that consciousness and psyche are identical. This is only another piece of intellectual presumption. Psychic forces have far more to do with the realm of the unconscious. Our mania for rational explanations obviously has its roots in our fear of metaphysics, for the two are always hostile brothers. Hence, anything unexpected that approaches us from that dark realm is regarded either as coming from outside and therefore as real, or else as an hallucination and therefore not true. The idea that anything could be real or true which does not come from the outside has hardly begun to dawn on contemporary man.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's more of like, if you're still having struggling, if you're still struggling, like opening up to the idea of this, like, and it's like you almost have to remove yourself from like left brain logic almost, and try to intellectualize this, because a lot of this is subconscious. I'm still trying to get through Psychology of the Unconscious by Carl Jung, and that's probably going to be a lot more in depth. I'll probably do a whole video of that just on its own, just to kind of help suss out this idea more. But yeah, so like I said, these gods are here, whether or not they're coming from internal or external or whatnot. It really doesn't matter. And they work in different ways. So like I said, American gods, they could be like media, technology, economics, or like old gods like Wotan. In that video that we just saw by Carl Jung, he actually goes into more in depth about like how this like berserker, Egregore is what they call it, almost like takes over the human, basically like going back to like the ego taking over the spirit instead of the other way around, how it should be. And this is another way you can look at it too, is like the ego being a separate entity. And like I said earlier, when I said like conquering the ego is kind of like, it's a bit of like a troublesome way to put it, because there's negative aspects to it. Like you could be so obsessed with conquering the ego that you end up like just becoming the ego, conquering your own spirit. Kind of weird, but yeah, it can happen. But yeah, so we want to get into this other movie called Revolver. I actually don't hear a lot of people talk about it. It's a really good movie, but it basically they pit this man, Jason Statham, against his own ego. We're gonna try and get through the rooftop scene. It's gonna have like major spoilers in the movie, but I both recommend it both like as an entertainment movie by itself and just as like it's heavily laden with truth drops. You should definitely check it out. This is from an extended like deleted scene.
Originally in the film,
I don't know if
we had
copyright's
made
gonna
it
tag
a
this
much
one,
more
but
cryptic
we'll see.
scene. So this is the extremely overt golf course scene, which I thought gave too much away.
Okay.
Get out of this, Jake.
The formula's the same.
So he's talking about in his head.
Where does this game stop?
What are you doing, Jake?
Yeah,
He's playing head games with you again.
Voice head, his
Is it
ego.
me that's playing head games with you, Mr. Green? You've heard that voice for so long, you believe it to be you. You believe it to be your best friend.
They should believe their opponent to be their best friend.
Where's the best place an opponent should hide?
Yeah, so this kind of goes into it.
The very last place you would ever look.
And if the opponent is smart,
You would place his victim within an environment that he can control. The bigger the environment, the easier the control.
So this is talking about the ego and how it retains control over the spirit, over the higher self.
Gradually, the victim will play by the rules he's told to play by.
And this also goes, okay, so this is like your ego, both like on an individual level, how your ego sets these parameters, and also how society as a whole sets these parameters for society.
What is the first rule of any game, Mr. Green?
The only way to get smarter is by playing a smarter opponent.
Oh yeah, they talk about like and their whole thing is like combining chess with cons, and basically they use that as a catalyst for this man to con himself out of his ego, basically. It's a very interesting movie, like I said. And this scene probably goes way too much in depth into it. But if you've seen it before, I recommend watching this deleted scene. But we're going to skip ahead and go to the elevator scene, which is actually where he ends up conquering the ego itself. So he's claustrophobic, and he has this fear of elevators. So he's sitting there in the dark. He placed himself in this situation to conquer the ego. Very
Who
important.
takes care of the good times, Jake? We're a team. We're best pals, Jake. You want to get rid of me? You know life without me? You know no life without me.
Yeah, no, this idea that like, I've seen this a lot with people like doing meditation. It's really I don't know how to describe it, but just the way people are like struggle with just quieting the voice in their head is very difficult for them. And like I'm not a very advanced meditator, but that was actually one of the first things I learned to be able to do, and it actually has helped like immensely. The way I would describe it, it's almost like holding your breath, but inside. And like there's different ways to like actually accomplish this too. I would recommend going out. I actually have a book. I'll probably put it in the description. A really good book that goes over different types of meditation that can really help.
Do you know life without me? No, because it doesn't exist.
That's what he says. Like, life without me isn't life. Like this ego of like this idea of like this ego trying to accumulate wealth and satisfaction, both materially and whatnot. It's like, well, if you get rid of me, like if you get rid of this like desire, what are you going to be left with? You're not going to be happy. Desire is what makes you happy, right? No, not at all.
No, because I don't exist. Tell all your friends about me then, Jake. I protect you, and I control you.
Yeah, he's sitting there like, yeah, this head is like, this voice is really doing a number on him.
I say do. You obey.
Notice silence, stillness. Be still and know that I am God.
If I say you're
Quote
scared,
from the Bible.
been listening to the other side, haven't you, Jake?
Yeah, how it sits there. That's another thing that it likes to do. The ego likes to try to implement fear a lot. That's one of its biggest and easiest things to do, because fear is like a very low vibrational, low chakra, like animalistic emotion. It brings you it brings you down. Like Dune, fear is the mind killer. It kills the mind and brings you into this like animalistic state.
Listening to people that want to hurt you, Jake. New people. New! Not old.
Yeah, he's like, people want to hurt you, Jake.
Get rid of them, Jake, forever. They're the enemy, not me. They're new, I'm old. I stay, they go.
Yeah.
I say, you do. You're weak without me. Weak.
Yeah.
It's us against them, Jake. It's us against them. I'm coming to get you.
That moment.
You want to get rid of me, Jake? You want to make an enemy out of me? You want to get rid of me, do ya?
Oh, he says it earlier. He says, I can hear you. And the ego goes, what? He says, I can hear you. So that's a really good, like, this is what, like, Buddhist and Zen practitioners talk about detachment from the ego. Being able to, like, say I and refer to it as you. And it really helps to deal with whatever. So looking at the ego, separating it from yourself and seeing its like pageantry really helps to detach from these tricks, these mind tricks.
Do ya? You wanna get rid of me? Me? Boom. Huh.
Yeah, and he thinks that's another thing is like you'll sit when you learn how to like quiet the mind, like you'll sit there and be like, it's gone, and then that starts turning into a whole other like wheel of thought. And it just comes right back. Just like that.
Still here, Jake?
Yeah.
How long have I looked after you? Can't win this one without me. Oh, no. You know why? I am you.
That's its biggest trick. It almost reminds me of like the devil's biggest trick was convincing people that he doesn't exist. So yeah.
You ain't me.
Ah, you are not me.
The greatest con that he ever pulled was making you believe that he is you.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, that movie's really good about like showing like the conquering of the ego, but like I said, conquering it is pretty like troublesome to say it like that. Because you can the same way like fear brings you down into like a lower vibrational animalistic level, this warrior mentality of like conquering can also bring you back down that level too. There's like a serenity you have to achieve with it. And I want to, yeah, I'll start with her to begin with. Stacy Hoch, or Hoch, or I don't know how to say it. She's a YouTuber. She actually has a lot of really good videos on, what is it? Codependent empaths who have to deal with narcissistic abuse. So those people specifically, especially if they like grew up with narcissistic parents, they actually like had a hard time developing their ego or establishing a good relationship with it. So she talks about how this idea of conquering the ego can be troublesome, and there's like another perspective you can go at it as well that can really help you, depending on your relationship with it. So we'll go ahead and play that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, sorry about this, guys.
So we have this idea that we are not supposed to have an ego, and the truth is that is not what self-care is about. It's not about scheduling the pedicure so I can get away for a minute, right? Because if I'm trying to get away from what I hate because I'm overwhelmed, that's not self-care. So self-care is the act of actually seeing yourself in your ego, right? All of the self, the whole kaleidoscope of your own parts, and being able to objectively see that and care for it and love it. And I don't mean care for it like take it out and give it. I mean literally care about it. And when you care about yourself, the actions that you're supposed to take of self-care might look different. It's not going to be the pedicure, and it might not even be going for a walk. It might be, hey, have a different thought. Care about that self a little bit differently, because even though I see the shame that is going on right now, ooh, your self-care practice is not to like escape this. It's to go, okay, I see that, and I love you anyway. I see that you're feeling hatred about yourself or hatred about the other, and that's okay, I love you anyway. And then you get to the place where you recognize that when you can get to that place, when you can see every other, kaleidoscope of an ego objectively, it's like, oh, that's just another part of the self, and that other is just a part of myself, and I am just a part of the other self. So when we get to that space, we find it not only easier to hold space for ourselves and care about ourselves, but from that space we can actually care about other people and actually care about the world, because we are accepting, we're not rejecting and going, that's not me, and projecting it out into the world. God, thank God we're not doing that, because it's very frustrating. We're not going, that's not me, and you're this, right? And then when somebody does stab at you with some sort of like energetic dart, you can go, oh, well, I see the dart. And before, when you were hit by it and paralyzed by it, it was a little bit of a different paralyzation, because you were like, oh, this is shame-inducing, this is all me, I'm absorbed by my ego, saying, oh my God, that really hurt, why are you doing this to me? Instead of going, okay, I see that jab that they just threw at you, I'm gonna just pull that right out for you because I care about you. And yeah, that might be they jabbed at a very specific part of your blueprint that is open for a receptor for a reason, and maybe you should look at that as far as like what your ego structure is. Maybe it would be helpful to know why that jab hurt you or was meaningful to you, but God, that jab's not you, and you can easily just pull it right out because you care about the self that was jabbed. Just because somebody else doesn't care about you doesn't mean that you shouldn't, right?
Yeah. So that was, yeah. She talks about, like I said in my other video, on Jainism, like you can take all of these ideas and run with it, like from any perspective, can lead you to on this path towards like salvation or whatever you want to call it, but every path can also lead you backwards. So like I said, this idea of like conquering the ego can be, let's go back. This idea of like conquering the ego can be helpful. It can also be hurtful. Stacy's perspective, where you have to like love the ego and care for it and care about it, that can also be helpful, but that can also slide into like becoming completely egoic if you're not careful. So yeah, Stacy, she actually got she did that video based on this passage out of this book by Ken Wilber called Egolessness, and this actually has a lot of really good insight as well into this idea. So yeah, blue is what you want to pay attention to, green is absolutely what you should be doing, yellow is what you want to be careful of, and red is what you should avoid. I kind of like highlighted these passages just to make them easy to read. So he says, precisely because the ego, the soul, and the self can all be present simultaneously, we can better understand the real meaning of egolessness, a notion that has caused an inordinate amount of confusion. But egolessness does not mean the absence of a functional self. That's a psychotic, not a sage. It means that one is no longer exclusively identified with the self. So like going back to that, the Jason Statham movie Revolver, this idea of dominating or destroying the ego, it's kind of not what you're going for. It's not what you should be going for. So yeah, he continues, people want their egoless sages to fulfill their fantasies of saintly or spiritual, which usually means dead from the neck down, without fleshy wants or desires, gently smiling all the time. All of the things that people typically have trouble with: money, food, sex, relationships, desire. They want their saints to be without. Egoless sages are above all that. is what people want. Talking heads is what they want. Religion, they believe, will simply get rid of all baser instincts, drives, and relationships, and hence they look to religion not for advice on how to live life with enthusiasm, but on how to avoid it, repress it, deny it, or escape it. That's typically the struggle that people have when dealing with their ego or trying to fix their relationship with their ego. This idea, and it goes back to like that animalistic, like it's kind of what she said too. Like, it's not me. I have to kill it. I have to kill it. It's not me. So yeah, he goes on. The typical person wants a spiritual sage to be less than a person, somehow devoid of all the messy, juicy, complex, pulsating, desiring, urging forces that drive most human beings. We expect our sages to be an absence of all that drives us. All the things that frighten us, confuse us, torment us, confound us. We want our sages to be untouched by them altogether. And that absence, that vacancy, that less than personal is what we often mean by egoless. But then he continues, egoless does not mean less than personal. It means more than personal. Think of the great yogis, saints, and sages, from Moses to Christ to Padasambhava. They were not feeble-mannered milquetoasts, but fierce movers and shakers, from bullwhips in the temple to subduing entire countries. They rattled the world on its own terms, not in some pie-in-the-sky piety. Many of them instigated massive social revolutions that have continued for thousands of years, and they did so not because they avoided the physical, emotional, and mental dimensions of humanness and the ego that is their vehicle, but because they engaged them with a drive and intensity that shook the world to its very foundations. No doubt they were also plugged into the soul, deeper psychic and spirit form of self, the ultimate source of their power, but they expressed that power and gave it concrete results, precisely because they dramatically engaged the lower dimensions through which that power could speak in terms that could be heard by all. Yeah, that's a really good. So basically he's saying that he's operating, these characters operate on higher spirit, but they're expressing that higher spirit through the ego, almost like through these dimensions, which is why these people are able to have such a large effect. They're able to touch upon so many different varieties and levels of people. Yeah. The great movers and shakers were not small egos. They were, in the very best sense of the term, big egos, precisely because the ego, the functional vehicle of the gross realm, can and does exist alongside the soul, the vehicle of the subtle, and the self, vehicle of the causal. To the extent these great teachers moved the gross realm, they did so with their egos, because the ego is the functional vehicle of that realm. They were not, however, identified merely with the egos. This is one of the more important parts. That's a narcissist. Like I said, when she was talking about loving the ego, loving the self, can snowball into this narcissistic passion. They simply found their egos plugged into a radiant cosmic source. The great yogis, saints, and sages accomplished so much precisely because they were not timid little toadies, talking about people who try to ignore their ego, but great big egos plugged into the dynamic ground and goal of the cosmos itself, plugged into their own higher self, alive to the pure Atman, the pure I, that is one with Brahman. They opened their mouths and the world trembled, fell to its knees, and confronted its radiant God. Yeah, so like I said, going back to the Kingdom of Heaven clip, whether you're dealing with kings, emperors, gods, the ego, yourself, your own vehicle, avatar, like you have to find that higher spirit plugged into, you have to plug into your own higher self and act detached from the ego. Not detached, because you still want to, like, you still want the ego to you're almost like delegating the ego, like putting it in its place almost, and putting you in your proper place, which is just taking responsibility almost for your actions. So yeah, that is American Gods. Yeah, thank you. Hopefully this next video, actually, oh yeah, that's it. That is what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so this next video, or I'm gonna start releasing videos of my poetry. So a couple years ago, I actually made a New Year's resolution to write a haiku every day for an entire year. And I kind of based it on Jack Kerouac's like American haikus. So they weren't like the specific 575. They could be different like structures, different. It was more like freeform haiku. But yeah, so I'm gonna release videos, like one for each month. So January's haikus, I'm gonna omit a lot of them, just based on whether or not they involve like any personal issues, or they mention like people from my actual life or something like that. But yeah, I'm gonna release most of them. A lot of them are really good. Actually, the quote on my banner is one of the ones I wrote. So yeah, if you're interested in that, check it out. If not, my next video is probably going to be on psychology of the unconscious. I have one book I want to get through before I get into that, but yeah, you'll probably won't see that video until like February or so. So yeah, well, thank you guys. Y'all have a great day.